Well, hello people, and welcome back to part 8 of Thessia, our Australia-inspired build. I hope you're having a wonderful day. We're going to get started today by sketching out some frames for today's build, which is going to be a regional container port. A lot of fun, these things, and I've been dying to get into a modded one since discovering some of Avania's warehouse assets, which we'll be using in today's build. But a lot of fun with node controller and the network anarchy stuff here to get our frame established. Some nice keys, and we're also going to do some nice sort of seawall work as well. What turns into a really fun port. Please enjoy the hyperlapse, and I'll see you in the live play. So the residents of Sentinel are currently having some garbage issues problems. There's empty VB cans and Hungry Jack's sort of packets everywhere, right? So I want your guys' opinion on something. So Sentinel's kind of turned into quite an industrial town, which is fine. You know, we do want an industrial themed town. And I'm thinking for garbage collection, just been trying out some assets, and I think I want to include eventually the Japanese waste processing building, because it kind of looks amazing sat in the background of the town, right? This isn't going to be today's build. That'll definitely be a separate industrial build, and we'll probably partner it with some of Avania's upcoming Industrial Revolution stuff. But let me know what you think of just having that asset there as part of that eventual build. But I think it just kind of sits really nicely, especially on that angle. I don't know. The blockiness of it really tickles the pickle, so to speak, you know? So let me know what you think of the waste disposal unit there. But today's episode, of course, if you would have seen from today's hyperlapse, is all focused around a fun little container port build. So I want another method of import and export for Thessia's industry, right? Currently we're relying on only trains, but now we're going to have some ships in here, which will be a lot of fun. So we're going to be using a lot of Avania's warehouse assets, but to get started, first of all, I actually want to place down some key water assets that are going to, of course, going to be part of the build. And this is going to include the ferry depot and also the cargo harbour as well. So I think we're going to run with a couple of cargo harbours. So let's first of all get this placed up, and we're going to remove some of these roads for right now. And let's get these placed in. Or something like that, I think. We of course want to use network multi-unlock to get rid of these segments here, so we can actually replace them out with industrial word, so everything's kind of matching the theme. So just snap into those points on the ship, and then we can come back into network multi-tool and then just relock those segments. Wonderful. Now we just want to sort of drag this back until we're about level with the road, I think, and then we can use move its height controls just to bring everyone back down to earth. Something like that should do well. And then we'll also do the same here again too. Seems good enough. Oh no, that's not good enough. Let's not do that. So we'll have them in there, set everyone to the same height, and then we can grab that industrial road again and then hook them all into the system. And look like something like this. So we've also used node control as well, as you would have seen in today's hyperlapse, just to help remove markings and widen out more important junctions within the port. But I'm pretty happy with those, right? It's not too big. Don't want a proper major container port today, but we will be using some containers. But I'm happy with this. And a big shout out as well, of course, to Barry in the Discord for suggesting Geraldton, Albany as well, some various different smaller Australian ports for inspiration today. So huge thanks to Barry. Amazing. Cool. So I'm pretty happy with those. Let's return now to what else we wanted in here, which was going to be at the ferry depot. And I think this is going to be a pretty good shout here, isn't it? So let's remove some of our initial frames. And then we'll stick this one in possibly about here. And again, we'll do that same trick with multi-tool, just so we're consistent with the same roads across the whole port. And then we just move it to grab our buildings and nodes and bring everyone down to the same level. And that should just give us another bit of blockiness and bulkiness on our port here, which I'm going to be happy with. And it actually now gives us the perfect excuse to introduce Thessia's first ferry network. So I'm not sure if we should have a ferry that goes over to Valkyrie. That feels like it might be a little bit overkill because that is a long journey to get there. But I don't know, maybe we'll put that in the time lapse. I can't imagine it's a efficient route to take. Surely the roads and the trains are a lot faster than that. But it's certainly going to make sense, I think, to have another ferry depot down here, or another ferry stop. And then we'll actually hook this into the lines. Let's go ahead and grab it. So you should see a lot more activity come into the waterways here. And then we'll let this run across the bay from Sentinel and into this one here. And now hopefully we can have a little ferry stop meandering back into. Again, eventually it will expand around the islands, but for right now it's a little bit short. And we'll just give it a very temporary connection and build something around this later on in the episode. Wonderful. That's actually, of course, we've actually got a choice of ferry now, haven't we, since the last update? Which one should we go for? How about the 30 capacity ferry? I don't think it's too bad. Of course, ferries are about to get an update in their capacity, so this will eventually become 60 as of next week. I'm happy with that. It's a bit different from the regular one. I think I'll be alright with it. Cool. So in order to actually help Thessia's import and export AI kick in a little bit, we actually need to turn off... oh, there's one of the cargo trains. Very nice. Yes, some of our train stations over here in Valkyrie. So we've turned off a couple of them just to help the train AI calm down a little bit while the ship AI starts to kick in. So we'll eventually see a ship turn up anyway. But now let's turn our attention towards quite a fun aspect of this build, and one that I've been waiting to do for a long time. Of course we had no excuse really to use any of these assets in their ILOs because there was no sea. So I'm really keen to try and play with some of them. So let's get them out. They are, of course, Avania's wonderful container stacks that function as warehouses, of course. And we can have quite a lot of fun with these, I think. So if we position them up against our cargo harbour here, so we're pretty much happy with how everyone sits. Should be a little bit something like that. And then I think we'll run them in sets of 2. So what I mean by that is we're going to have sort of 2 like this. Make sure we're flush so there's no tear in the texture. And then we'll have an industrial road between them. And what this does, especially when it's surface painted and we also sort of have the aesthetic repeated behind it. So like we have that concrete verge there, and then we can grab some more warehouses again, just keep mixing them up so we get the different shapes and sizes with them. Let's have a couple here. And then another one there. And I wonder actually, because we're so close to the road here, if I was to actually just spin it around on its axis, yeah, it would actually maintain its connection there just next to the side, so we could mix and match them in various different ways. Let's maybe have another one facing there, and again he is going to maintain his connection, which is fabulous. And then we just want to really tell these guys to store whatever we need. For a good chunk of it, I imagine it's going to be commercial zone goods, just because there's not really anything else in Thessia at the minute. We might actually import some raw resource. Unique factory would probably work quite well in this harbour as another sort of like main sort of port building, I guess. So we'll set them all to commercial goods and then hopefully just enjoy the aesthetic of our labour. Right, what wonderful assets these are. So to actually have like functioning cargo containers that are warehouses, it's so good. These are like such nice assets. There's a load of them on the workshop and they're all in Thessia's asset collection down below if you do want to come and play with them. So very exciting. To make sure we're not encroaching upon a road too much. Something that should help. Awesome. So we get the point, right? We can have lots of these across the port, and we certainly will. Definitely where they're appearing. We'd also like a little bit of concrete surface painter, of course, in most of the spaces especially up near the head of the port. We'll have some grass here as well, but quite an overgrown tropical vibe is what we're going to go for here today. And possibly up to and against the edge of the quays as well is going to be appropriate for a surface painter. Something like that, hopefully. Just see everyone through. How's about that? I love as well when it's all surface painted, we get kind of like a little lip off of what would be the concrete yards compared to the road, and I think the yellow bollards on the industrial road are really helping the build as well, aren't they? So I'm happy with that, right? We can expect some container aesthetics here. Let's go ahead and get some more placed in these spaces. So you'll see as these warehouse assets fill up, their container actually size increases, which is so cool. Absolutely love it. Just amazing assets. Can't suggest that you go and get these enough. So that's going to fill out, of course, so we'll get this ready to go. So I mentioned earlier that I'd like to explore the possibility of having a unique factory within the harbour, and I think I've settled on the household plastics factory. It's a really nice asset, of course, most of the unique factories are, but it gives us kind of another chunky building, which I think is a really key aesthetic of a port, especially for the ones we're looking at in Google Earth today, especially the one near Geraldton, if I'm pronouncing that right, at least I hope I am anyway. But of course this wants a little bit of bob work. Let's get rid of those terrible palms, and probably the green trees out the front as well. There we go, thank you very much, Robert. So, of course, this requires petroleum and plastic, neither of which we are producing, and we don't also have an oil refinery yet at the minute. We will eventually, but not for a while. So what I was thinking we could do is incorporate an oil industry building into the port, and essentially kind of use this as a port entrance as well, right? So we'll have this down here, and then let's just push this industrial area up and over the port. This will function as our port entrance. We'll also bob this as well. So we'll place it out with palms and gum trees, just to make it a bit more palatable in the eye. And will serve as a nice entrance for the port as well, I think, won't it? And I think perhaps a little bit of orientation might come into favour here as well. If we can have this on the angle without encroaching across too many spaces. And then sort of have it sort of to fill this space here. I think a touch more bob just to get rid of those vanilla bushes would be welcome as well. Awesome. Mods are really fun, you know, for just repurposing assets into different things. So that'll give us our port entrance, of course, a little bit of concrete brush and surface painter just to help extend that texture out. More things for our detailing time-lapse, of course. But because this is here now, we can actually import oil via our import functions, and here comes a ship coming into the city for the first time, which is nice. We have actually had a ship leave as well. So we need to produce petroleum and plastic. So I'm thinking just as part of our port area, we can have the pyrolysis plant, which is going to produce petroleum for us. Now these aren't enormous assets, so they're quite easily sort of detailable and fun to fit into a certain space. So why don't we go for here up on the corner? I think what I do want to do here is almost try create another sort of industrial yard out of all of these. So that gives us petrol. Let's see now if we can produce plastics, which hopefully will come from this. It's all about positioning to find the best location. So if we can have him here, that's going to be really good. Then how about you on your side, just next door? And as long as it's maintained its road connection, then we should be okay. So if we have that like there, okay, we can now see just by positioning these in their right angles, we can start to create these little industrial yards, and then possibly a bit of the old faithful oil industry fence, just to link all these little bits together and extend out where needed. We can have a bit of our port now produce the resources required for the factory. And I hope as well that that's not going to stand out too much, is it? I think that's going to be okay, right? I think I'm pretty happy with that. It's going to be a nice way to use some oil assets in the port, which will be quite a lot of fun, I hope. And we're also going to name this Mock Look port as well, after one of our wonderful Patreon subscribers, Jai Mock Look. Thank you for all your support, mate. I hope you enjoy the port named after your good self today. And here we go, right? Here's a ship. So really kind of keen to see what this looks like from people enjoying Sentinel's Beach last episode. I really like that industrial port just off on the horizon now, the opposite side of the bay. Makes it come to life a lot more, doesn't it? And then our little import ships can come and drop stuff off. And hopefully this will, you know, disperse around the rest of the city. Which should be quite a lot of fun, we hope anyway. So these guys will just need the import, well, they need to import oil. So the small crude tank farm, I think, is going to be the most appropriate asset for that, isn't it? And can we have 2 of these down? It'd be great if we could. It looks like there might be just enough room to finagle 2 of them together. Yeah, if we can have the pipes, and then we can actually use network multi-tool to unlock those fence segments, so the asset will fit in how we want it to. So again, we'll just use network multi-tool to hit unlock, and then we can delete the both of them, and then slide this asset into position how we want. Possibly as well might want to just remove that segment also, and that really opens it up then for fusing opportunities. We can perhaps say, okay, let's line up those pipes and have them sat in that position there. And again, one more little bit of network multi unlock, and then we can perhaps do some slightly different prop fencing or variations of prop fencing around that, and then that will give us our oil storage for the oil production that's actually going to sit as part of the port as well. So it should be quite nice as well once it's detailed. So we'll see just how much capacity this will generate. We'll just have to wait and see really. But these 2 just had its first delivery of oil. This should be able to keep that factory supplied. I guess we'll have to wait and see, won't we? Awesome. But ships coming and going now, which is great. So I just want to see how Thessia behaves from an AI perspective now. So we turned off a couple of train stations here to get that one to trigger. So we'll just get the boats to come in. So now let's turn on one train station back in Valkyrie. And hopefully the ships will still carry on coming in. Because that definitely was the problem when we first started, well, when I tested the build. We weren't having any ships, but turning off a train station did force them to come in. So I'm guessing it's just a sort of import capacity, if you like. But we've got a very purple ship coming in, which is nice so far. And also I don't think we're too wrong as well using these fenceless keys. I really like the stone aesthetic here in the water. Then I've also used node controller to tighten off those corners so they're square and not round. Which again I think really helps a port build, doesn't it? I think it does. Fantastic. Well, I'm happy with this for right now. Things are starting to piece together, I think. So I think I'm also feeling one of the underground storage caverns to also sit in as part of our petrochemical bit of the harbour here. We're going to be able to access it, and I think we probably actually will do a touch of node controller here, and then just bring that down to a 50% stretch. Then also the same with that red node on that junction too. Fabulous. So that'll allow it in. Of course we can box this in and sort of flesh out this little area with some props during our time lapse, but I'm pretty happy with the idea of having a little, I guess, petrochemicals area of the port here. So I'm happy with that. It's going to be pretty fun. There's one more thing I want to have a look at before we turn to a detailing time lapse, and just sort of seeing the port now from this perspective. I think I'd like to just sort of alter its shape a little, so I think we're going to knock this road back just a touch, and I want to allow some sort of parking in here too, so let's account for that. We'll grab some of our favourite parking lot roads, and let's go for a slightly wider one. Imagine there would be a sort of significant workforce here that needs that parking, so we can have that in, although there's a big lump in that node there, so let's bring that back down to this one. And then I think I'm going to have a bit of an office building here, either some zonable office, or I imagine actually one of the Japan content creator assets. Something small, maybe like the small office building. Maybe the one without the parking next to it might be more appropriate. Can we go for this one? Which one's this? The district office? I think we might have this as part of our sort of port entrance maybe. Perhaps on an angle if we can accommodate the connection. So I was going to be overly happy there actually, does it? Has to be quite close, that one. Maybe we can have it here then. I guess do we want to maybe switch it around for the entrance? I guess that might be a little bit better. And then we can do some other roads to accommodate that. I think I just might go for a bit of service road. And we'll have this come down and out front. And then we'll upgrade that bit of the road again into service road here if we can. Super. That should give me what I want. So we can now have some parking. And then with the way that the port now sits, I'd like to try and trim off that shape a little bit if at all possible. Probably up to about there. And what we might do is possibly introduce a one-way loop system here just for, not that the traffic's an issue at the minute, but just because it is in industry traffic, one ways are always a good idea. So I think we will actually just feed the port into a one-way loop by having the entrances function like so. So this is the way back out. Cool, a bit of no control there will be welcome too. Hide the markings and maybe a little bit of sort of industry themed IMT might also be welcome to help our port introduce as well. And then what we'd like to do, we'd have actually use these sort of rocks here for a rock retaining wall if you like with the coast, but just want to do a bit more terraforming so we can sort of chisel out the shape of our harbour a little bit more. Just so it sort of runs into here, and then we'll just soften that out a touch and rework our rock linings so the water sort of follows that new angle of the port, which should take a little bit more of the blockiness out of it because it is a bit blocky at the minute, but I think that should tidy it up. But otherwise it's not looking too bad, and I'm pretty happy with it. I think I do just want to try and run a ferry to Valkyrie before we detail. I'm just curious to see how it's going to perform. I feel like this is way too long of a route for the Sims to even consider taking, especially with the speed of ferries. But maybe when there's other towns along this shoreline here, it might make more sense for it. But for right now, we are just going to give this a little try. We'll see how it goes together. Let's go ahead and get that road, and we'll just feed this directly into Main Street Valkyrie. And hopefully this isn't going to be too much of a hassle. Now we should just be able to bring this over here. Add the stop there. And then we want to add that one that we took from this one over here. Drag the line to add that stop in. Cool, so that is a long old journey for them to take. But we'll see indeed if it is worth doing. I don't think it is going to. I think it's just too far. It makes much more sense for the Sims to drive. Or of course get the train back to Valkyrie than it does to take the ferry, but it might have more purpose when there's more towns along this shoreline in the very far future. Otherwise, I'm happy with how this is developing. Let's move into a detailing time. That's now a ton of prop work to do in this open space. Again, all of our favourite industrial palettes that we've covered before. Refine our little petrochemical processing facility, hopefully. A few more cargo containers, possibly a bit of plopped industry as well. Some generic industry might go quite nicely in a build like this. But we get it detailed, and then hopefully have a functional little port with the absolute conga line of ferries coming out from the depot. Yes, it's going to be a busy ferry line now, isn't it? There they go, though. And a collision course with the ship, maybe? Yeah, it's a sensible part, isn't it? Yeah. There it goes, though, a little ferry. We'll see if anyone uses it, but I doubt it. Anyway, let's get things detailed, and then we'll be right back. let's have a detailing review, shall we? So at the entrance to the port, we've used IMT to mark out which direction the port should be. I think it's pretty cool. Definitely want to do more of this. We actually did some last episode that you guys wouldn't have seen. Over here, did a little box and then put an abbreviation in for Valkyrie, as in, you know, the direction of Valkyrie is down here. So definitely want to start doing more of this in and around Thessia. So let me know what you think of it. Either way, a little bit of IMT, a yellow chevron or stripes, I guess, just to help mark out some spaces that indeed we have in and around the port. Lots of new fence work. We're using lots of clues, new networks, which are just absolutely wonderful to line the entrance roads to the port with a little royal palm pattern, and then also brought in that retaining sort of seawall, if you like, all against the edge of the port here, which looks super nice. The port looks just really great. I'm super happy with how all of our assets have sat into the build, especially from over here down on the beach as well. You get a real sense of industry as you look across the bay over to that industrial port in the corner, so really happy with that. Dropped in a police station as some sort of port security, if you like, alongside a couple of our classic Aussie police car props and a couple of vans down there as well, with again some more of that network fencing. I did leave some grass around the port as well. I didn't want everything totally concrete heavy. In around the office space has had its car parking put in, and a pretty cool choice of asset I think for a port here. I'm really happy with it. Then we have our petrochemicals yard, which is tacked onto the storage. The oil cavern is also here as well, and then just brought that fence area around. And see workers walking around here as well, which adds such a sort of different level, doesn't it, to actually have, you know, moving port workers. So really happy with the inclusion of that oil asset, and then a little bit of parking down here as well before we arrive at more of that rock wall detailing with the fencing. A classic collection of industrial vehicles and crates and whatnot, some floating vans over here as well. And then we've also used these concrete sound barriers as kind of markers for the edges of the container yard, which has turned out really nicely. We've got a few of these knocking about. We'll see some further down that way as well. A little bit of fused generic industry, always a favourite, these little wooden shacks over here, with another loader over this way and a little smaller sort of in the container yard office space if any administration needs to happen. These little crane props here are great for fleshing out sort of industrial container yards, so really happy with those. They're just sort of crane props, and then more sort of crane and loading props over here again as well. Our container yards are nice and full now, where we didn't have the container spaces and just regular space. I actually dropped in the decal that comes with these container yards, which works out really nicely, so you know the container yard isn't totally full. There is space here for, you know, more things to come in. Dropped in a medium warehouse. So essentially, the port really here is just warehouses and import. So we're storing a ton of Thessia's goods here, which is quite, I guess, appropriate and thematic for a container yard, you know. All the burgers and VB beer that's imported and exported as well from Thessia is kind of all stored here, ready to go, which is really cool. Yeah, medium warehouse, because these kind of have a little small distribution centre vibe. So lined up some of our favourite trailer and truck props in and around this, so it all helps. Add another little bit awkward space here, so some containers. More of that sound barrier here as well. And some trash props just to help bring it all together. And a big shout out, I love the view from the fence here. There's sort of a nice little spot with the sound barrier, then the fencing in the trees. You can see the water and the beach on the other side. Just a huge lover of how that has developed. Really, really happy with it. Into more just simple container work, some trucks knocking about near some more cranes. And more of that sound barrier against the edge of the quay as well. It's quite simplistic, almost minimalistic industrial detailing, but I think it's quite impactful. And I really love those keys as well. There is actually an industrial network key from Avanya on the workshop, which I very nearly went with. But I think we'll actually use that for our main sort of super container port in the eventual downtown area, rather than out here in what is a fairly kind of rural-ish cargo regional port, I guess. And then our factory sits in here too. And it's just turned into a really fun industrial space, a real sort of important import-export hub for southern Thessia at least. And there's very few people coming from Valkyrie, although funnily enough there are actually a few folks waiting for the ferry to get across the bay, so people in Sentinel are using the ferry. They're just not going to Valkyrie on it, but maybe one day they will. As we said, once more towns lie down the coastline, the ferry will have a little bit more per person. Of course, we'll take it across to the volcano island as well when we come to work on that. But otherwise, guys, that is going to do it for today. Likes, comments and shares below really do help me out if you've enjoyed yourselves. If you haven't, please feel free to leave a dislike as well. This is my first attempt at a modded container port. I've been dying to do one of these things since discovering Avania's container warehouses. Some of the best assets on the workshop, in my opinion, just so versatile, and finally able to get them into a proper themed build like this is very exciting. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do enjoy some pretty brief cinematics, but otherwise I'll shut up and leave it there. And thank you all so much for watching, and as always, enjoy the rest of your day.